It's always an honor when you're able to come up in front of the church and really tell good news. And we have great news. Look around here at Bartlesville. We've met at many different places. And now, according to my wife, because I'm directionally challenged, I believe that our new building is that way. Is that correct? And we're building a beautiful turquoise church that can be seen from long distances. So, I prepared just a few remarks. I doubt these go over, say, 35, 40 minutes. No, they will not.
Chuck, can I interrupt you and say one thing?
Yes.
The baskets on the end of the rows, if you'd grab those, and they're little samples of the stone, if you just pass those around as Chuck speaks, that'll help us, and the kids especially, be able to touch and feel the stone on the church.
In 1997, members of Christ Presbyterian Church in Tulsa that lived in the Owasso area expressed a desire for there to be a reformed, gospel-centered church here in this fair city. And a small group of individuals began to pray in their living rooms about possibly launching a PCA church in their city. Now, 1997 was an interesting year for me. I was on staff at Christ Pres as a full-time youth minister. I was on staff with Craig Weaver, the associate pastor. I had no idea that there were a group of people. I didn't live in Owasso, thinking and believing and wanting the desire to be a church plant. I think, Craig, that we may have been the only PCA church in town in Tulsa. There were churches in Oklahoma City, a small church in Norman, Arkansas, Lawton, as I recall. I may not be catching them all. But the PCA has begun to grow. But in 1997, those group of individuals started praying to plant a church here. Also found a couple of other things. When we think about what has happened over the last 26 years, and this is not meant to be an embarrassment to anybody. Blake was 20 years old in 1997 at Texas A&M. Lauren was 16. She was still in high school. Nathan Duke, you know what? I've been in those youth ministry shoes of lock-ins, leadership camps, counselings. Nathan was born that year. Kim James, I don't know if she's here today, but she was in my youth group. She was 16. James Kalbarth, our treasurer now, was a grand old age of 6 years old. Nathan Keltner, one of our elders, was 16. His wife Anna was 14. TJ, I believe, if my math is right, you were 11 years old in 1997. Adam, our music minister, was 16. But 13 years later, after those individuals began to pray at Christ Pres about planting a church, in the spring of 2010, Ricky Jones, the pastor of River Oaks Presbyterian Tulsa, began to lead a handful of us to begin meeting monthly for evening worship service in Owasso. 6 months later, we began to meet weekly on Sunday evenings for a worship service every single Sunday evening. And in summer of 2011, we called Pastor Blake Altman, then a campus minister serving Princeton University, to lead our church. In 2012, Trinity Presbyterian transitioned from being a church plant to a particularized church, and we added our first 42 members on an Easter Sunday morning. Over the past 11 years, we've sent 2 groups of families out to plant churches in northeastern Oklahoma. In 2015, we set out families to Grove, Oklahoma, to Three Rivers Presbyterian Church, which was approved to be a mission church, a church that Lori and I occasionally attend when we are at our lake home at Grand Lake and Grove. In 2018, we sent out a second group of 20 families, and they established the church plant, Hope Church of Bartlesville. During this time, God has continued to bless our growth here at Trinity, but we've remained sojourners without a permanent place to call home. We've met at various places over the past 12 years, including Freedom Baptist, some of y'all remember it, you early goers, Presence Theater, Owasso YMCA, which, by the way, wasn't built in 1997, Owasso Public School 6th Grade Center, the Patriot Golf Club, more recently, Morrow Elementary School. Additionally, we met at local churches for special services such as Christmas Eve. And now, here we are at Barnes Elementary, our expected last temporary home directly next door, that way, to our land and building. 6 years after Blake accepted our call to be pastor, he and the elders began to search in earnest for a permanent home. And in 2017, Blake published an article, A Theological Vision for Physical Space, for the session to consider. And after much prayer, much discussion, it was adopted as Trinity's vision in regards to building our permanent home. Let me ask you, or let me tell you, if you have not read this document, or like me, perhaps you read this document 6 years ago, 2017 was 6 years ago, and you need a refresher, I encourage you to read the document. You can find it at risetrinity.com. There's a link at the bottom that says read, it's hard to miss in bold, read our theological vision for physical space. There's also about 20 copies, paper copies out in the foyer. And if we run out and you desire to have a paper copy, ask one of the elders and we'll be happy to get that to you. 5 years ago, we purchased 15 acres that way, right across the street, at 70th Street North and Memorial, as a place to build a permanent church home. And we kicked off our first capital campaign to raise $1.2 million to pay off the $650,000 purchase price and to invest in architectural renderings. Let me tell you, when Lori and I went to our first capital campaign to make a commitment, I believe it was a dinner. It's been a few years ago. I was all for it, but I looked around the room and I thought, $1.2 million, God? Is that possible? Well, this elder of little faith found out it was possible. In 2021, we started our second capital campaign to build phase one, our multi-purpose room. And while I'm a little ashamed to admit it, I once again looked around the room. We had about 200 adults, maybe a little less. And while Lori and I committed again to the capital campaign, I silently said to myself, God, we're only a congregation of 200 people. $3.6 million? Will we be able to do that? Well, God proved me wrong once again. So now, here I am to humbly announce, to date, the Lord has seen fit to provide more than $15 million. Not only to build the multi-purpose room, but to finish out in accordance with the session's original vision and stated in the article I referenced earlier that I highly encourage you to read. $15 million. Isn't God good and amazing? We could now build the multipurpose room, and we're expecting to be debt-free by the time we move in. God has, pro- God has provided us beyond our wildest imaginations. Now, some people might say, is that too much money to spend on a multi-purpose room? After all, God's people in the Old Testament didn't have a permanent building until Solomon built the temple in 721 BC. So let me be clear. We don't want to build some beautiful shrine as a symbol of our success or a monument to ourselves. However, we do want to build a church that honors God in its beauty and communicates our commitment to long-term ministry in Owasso and the Tulsa area. We also have a long-term vision that would include offering space to other local ministries that might share that space. Perhaps it would be Stand in the Gap. Perhaps it could be the Pregnancy Resource Center of Owasso. Perhaps our commercial kitchen will be utilized to feed the homeless, the shut-ins, and those in need. A lot of y'all won't know this because I didn't know the exact number. But since 2017, 14 different non-profit organizations have used our church offices at the Trinity House for various purposes. And we would like to continue to build upon that as we move into our new facility, and that's our intent. When we started dreaming of this permanent home in those early campaigns, we thought we might have to use materials that were functional in the short term, but would not stand the test of time, with the idea that we'd have to go back later and bring the facility in line with our vision. Another plug for you to go read that article. Instead, we've been able to add practical and aesthetic upgrades that in fact will save us money in the long run and keep us from having to go back and remodel it to our vision in the future. Make no mistake, this will be a beautiful facility. Now, this blessing has also meant that the timeline to complete the project has suffered lengthy delays in our timeline. Moving on. If you've ever built a home, I know that during construction, it can be easy to find yourself discouraged waiting for its completion. But when you move in, you enjoy your new dwelling and you'll quickly forget the impatience that you once felt. We recognize that completion deadlines have shifted over the course of the project. We originally talked about getting into a bare bones facility in February of 23. We now have an expected completion date near the end of July 2024, but I exhort you, do not be discouraged. Rather, be thankful for the resources God has given us, that in fact those resources are going to save us money over the long run, and that we're going to have a beautiful facility to honor God that we envision standing the test of time for generations to come. We are building a church that honors God's glory, that will serve the city and the region. That's always been our stated mission. On top of weekly worship service, this will also be a place, and children, young people, particularly, I want you to hear this. This will be a place where someday you may well get married. You may not be thinking about marriage right now. You probably aren't. But that's an exciting idea. But what our vision is that perhaps your family will be established in Owasso, and when I'm long gone, perhaps your grandchildren, even your great-grandchildren, will be married in this facility that we're building. We want it to stand the test of time. Last, I assure you that we're not done. As I mentioned, God has provided in such a way that when we move into our new facility in 24, we expect to be debt-free. And soon after that, we'll begin planning for phase 2 and eventually phase 3. I would also be amiss if I did not mention during this capital campaign that has raised more than $15 million. During this same period, our monthly tithes and offerings have increased significantly, and we thank you. We're well ahead of the 2023 budget. Isn't God good? Thank you for your faithfulness to God and your tithe and offerings. Thank you for your contributions to the capital campaign. God has been so good to us, and we give all the glory as we minister our community and we proclaim that grace indeed changes everything. Thank you.